This is Saurabh, and you're listening to my favorite talk show, The Weekly Show with Aditya.
This week we are going to continue the reading of the poem The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. There passed a weary time, each throat was parched and glazed each eye. A weary time, how glazed each weary eye. When looked westward, I beheld a something in the sky. At first it seemed a little speck, and then it seemed a mist. It moved and moved and took at last a certain shape I wist. A speck, a mist, a shape I wist, and still it neared and neared, as if it dodged a water spite, it plunged and tacked and veered. With throats slaked, with black lips baked, we could nor laugh nor wail. Through utter drought all dumb we stood. I bit my arm, I sucked the blood, and cried, "A sail, a sail!" With throats unslaked, with black lips baked, agape they heard me call. Gramercy, therefore joy did grin, and all at once their breath drew in, as they were drinking all. "See, see," I cried, "she tacks no more, hither to work us weal, without a breeze, without a tide. She steadies with upright keel." The western waves was all aflame. The day was well nigh done. Almost upon the western wave rested the broad bright sun, when that strange shape drove suddenly betwixt us and the sun, and straight the sun was flecked with bats. Heaven's mother, send us grace. As if through a dungeon grate he peered with broad and burning face. Alas, thought I, and my heart beat loud, how fast she nears and nears. Are those her sails that glance in the sun like restless gossameres? Are those her ribs through which the sun did peer as though through a grate? And is that woman all her crew? Is that a death, and are we two? Is that woman's mate? Her lips were red, her looks were free, her locks were yellow as gold, her skin was as white as leprosy. The nightmare, life and death was she, who thicks man's blood with cold. The naked hulk alongside came, and the twain were causing dice. "The game is done, I have won, I have won," quoth she and whistles twice. The sun's rim dips, the stars rush out. At one stride comes the dark, with far heard whisper over the sea. Off shot the spectre bark. We listened and looked sideways up. Fear at my heart as at a cup. My life blood seemed to sip. The stars were dim and thick the night. The steersman's face by his lamp gleamed white. From the sails the dew did drip, till clomb above the eastern bar the horn moon with one bright star within the nether tip. One after one by the star-dogged moon, too quick for groan or sigh, each turned his face with a ghastly pang, and cursed me with his eye. 4 times 50 living men, and I heard nor sigh nor groan. With heavy thump, a lifeless lump, they dropped down one by one. The souls did from their bodies fly. They fled to bliss or woe, and every soul it passed me by like the whiz of my crossbow. The moment the Indian T20 domestic tournament shifted its base from India to another country, the only such tournament to shift base, while other countries stationed at one city in their hometowns, like the NBA and the various European and English football leagues. So, as I said, the moment they shifted base from India to Dubai, it was never going to be a straightforward manner as far as the conducting of the domestic tournament was concerned, because it was all about the bubble, the containment zones, the social distancing, the various absurd tests that the athletes have to take to make sure that they do not get the flu. And despite all the efforts, a few athletes, a few members of the Chennai Indians team got the flu. And this flu, this fever isn't just the run of the mill flu slash fever. It's something which is the talk of the town. And if you get this particular strain of flu, you are looked upon in the eyes of a majority of individuals. And such was the impact of a few players of that team catching the flu that one of the players decided to abandon the tournament and come home. But the question is, how do you exactly analyze this situation? As I said, it was always complicated to host a tournament in another country, though this is not the first time this tournament has shifted base. But then it did not take them nearly 5 months to come to a decision, and finally, after relentless pursuing of the stakeholders involved, who themselves were fearful of the heavy losses they were going to suffer, especially the various team managements. They decided to risk it all and conduct the tournament. And now, the most interesting part of this tournament is that no concrete schedule has been announced. Though by default and design it was expected that the two teams who made it to the main event of last year's tournament were going to be the openers of this tournament. And now, with one of the teams, that is the Chennai Indians team, members getting the flu, falling sick, and the rules governing that if this happens, you have to quarantine yourself, means you cannot participate in training session. You have to isolate yourself, you have to quarantine yourself, and by the looks of it, this is what is exactly going to happen. And looking at this, the organizers of this tournament never announced a concrete schedule. Now I am wondering if the broadcasters of this tournament would even want the commentators to even travel, because the players have reached a month before. They have to quarantine themselves. They have been given separate rooms. An entire floor has been booked, and all those expenditures have been taken. But the question will be, it will always be, what is the ROI? After all, this is a for profit tournament. This tournament is no charity. No stakeholder involved is doing it from their hearts. They are doing it from the viewpoint of filling their pockets, filling their treasury. And they are worried that if a few star Indian players do not participate, the viewership will fall. As we know, spectators are not allowed inside the stadium, so they have to relegate themselves watching this particular tournament stationed on their couches in their homes. And if the MVPs of respective teams either leave the tournament due to reasons which are obvious, or if other factors arise, then these managements and the active and the passive stakeholders involved are in big trouble. What would I say about the players falling sick? For me, it happens. You fall sick, yes. You follow all the social distancing norms. You get tests and you isolate yourself, you quarantine yourself, and despite all the efforts, you eventually fall sick. Yet, the team management, despite all these events happening, will be looking forward to the conduct of this tournament. They will have to quickly work out a solution that the two entities involved, that is, the Indian Cricket Board and the various team management like the Chennai Indians, the Royal Challengers Mumbai, the Bangalore Super Kings, the Hyderabad Capitals, the Sunrisers Delhi, and other teams will have to quickly get over this chaotic environment, which has been used as an adjective by the print, electronic, and the pseudo media to describe the situation that prevails there. Compare this to the West Indies Premier League or the Caribbean T20 domestic tournament. Not only is that tournament being conducted, but it happened quietly. It then make a mountain out of a molehill as to whether they should or should not conduct a tournament. They quietly got their players to agree, including the overseas players. The players came, they followed all those norms, but it was done quietly. But unless something is exaggerated, and if it's not this tournament, then people won't enjoy. And then compare this to the Australian domestic tournament, which is not given that kind of an importance because of the lacunae of Indian players in that tournament. They quietly announced the schedules. Yes, even the Australian Cricket Board has its challenges, but they quietly announce the schedule. Now we know that England and Australia, before this tournament starts, are scheduled to play their own domestic tournament. That is, Australia and England will participate in one day and 20 over matches, and Australia has already reached England and are through their so-called practice sessions. And how can there be an Indian T20 domestic tournament without a few foreign or overseas players, and not the ones who are retired, especially the ones who are active and are playing actively for their respective countries? A few Indian players refusing to play won't hurt as much as if these foreign players, especially the active ones, including the likes of Butler, Stokes, Warner, Rabada, and the rest who play actively for their countries. If this group decides not to come, then that's even bad news for the various managements, because even though there are four foreign players who can play in the final 11, the four foreign players contribute more than 80% of a team's result to their team. The flu and the players getting the virus won't throw the tournament off as much as if these foreign players refuse to travel or refuse to be in containment zones after being subjected to already 30 days of containment, as Australia has been under that for a while. That's the fun of the sport. That's the fun of what is happening. Nobody knows what will happen. And things are going to get very interesting as far as the conduct of this particular tournament is concerned. So after more than 6 months of speculations as to whether the metro will reopen or not, or as we like to call the Delhi local trains, which is in comparison to the local trains in Bombay, keeping in mind that transportation like metro and buses are the lifeline of any city. Whether the city is London, Bombay, New York, or any other city in a major country, any other major metropolitan. Taxi system in these cities have always been expensive. It's preserved for what they call the luxury. After all, crowded bus stations and train stations have always been a part of the proud heritage of any metropolitan city. Why was it a pride? That is something we will never understand, but it will continue to be. Yes, there will be crowds, but the crowds will be limited. If the metro authorities and the federal government has their way, then there will be limited number of people inside the station as well as inside a train. Means no standing in the coach, means no long queues, probably no fear of pocket being picked. But right now the governments and the metro authorities are not concerned about an individual's pocket being picked. They're more concerned about the more absurd effects of crowding, which we all know what has been happening over the past 6 months. So, limited number of gates will be open at a station, longer queues and longer wait time expected as far as metro stations and bus stations are concerned as authorities check for the obvious absurd virus in individuals. Though I am not a fan of the metro or the bus because of the obvious crowding in the train and the bus stations, and even if these new rules were to be applied and crowd was to become minimal, would still want to avoid traveling using such transportation as I prefer taxi for point A to point B commute because of obvious reasons. Ironically, one of the more positive impacts of this limited number of people inside a metro and the metro station will be that individuals will at least, the commuters will at least learn how to wait patiently in a queue, because this is one thing that was missing as far as an Indian bus station or a train station was concerned. So, one thing I generally do not agree with is that no tokens will be issued and there will be automatic top up smart cards available for cashless, contactless travel. Now, let's analyze this for a while. Yes, they don't want tokens, no hand touching, and the idea of contactless proposed throughout, but then doesn't it mean that you have to use your mobile phones more, and mobile phones have a limited battery? Of course, the authorities will have to account for the systems crashing if more than 600 people, for example, are using the automatic card system. So, making it totally cashless may not be the best idea. What could be a better proposal could be to have both the systems, both the machines simultaneously working so that anybody who doesn't want to use cashless system can use the other machine and can slide a note through the slot and the token will come jutting out just like a vending machine or just like they are doing at parking slots in malls. The metro and the government authorities will have to take into consideration that what if an individual's card is lost. Yes, we do not expect such things to happen, but let's presume that humans are, after all, humans. What if someone forgets their smart card in their homes or it is lost, it is misplaced? These things can happen. So, the backup system, as far as the cash machine is concerned, should also be provided. What will happen till the metro and the bus stations open? Nobody knows. But as I said, one positive thing emerging from such guidelines is that at least individual will understand what a queue means. There will be no pushing and shoving, even if the reason for not pushing and shoving is because they have fears in their head of certain things being exposed. It will be the same ironical story when hotels also open. Here also they have tried to or are introducing QR codes. That is, we have to scan the menu from our phones. But then the entire idea of going to a hotel is not taking the phone, it's about going out and having fun. Why will I take my phone if I want to have fun? Yes, contactless is what they call the new normal, but it cannot be the absolute thing. It's a universal truth that cash and cashless have to function together. But either way, it will be an interesting experience as to when this happens. Limited number of people in a metro station, people sitting in seats which are spaced away, no standing in metro stations. Once again, I scoff at the paradoxical nature of such guidelines because these guidelines have emerged from something which has forced us to accept norms and rules which should have come the moment the idea of metro and buses began to become concrete. It has always baffled me that for so many years, for nearly 4 to 5 decades, crowded buses, pushing and shoving, standing in the buses or in the trains alike would always not amuse me. Those who listen to my talk show and each and every episode would know about my analysis of this during the 15th May episode where I talked about the hard nosed transportation SOPs. And this term new normal doesn't impress me. Now it's time for some light reading from the PG Woodhouse novel Aunt's Omnibus. Not at all. Sheer merit. Did Stinker cooperate? Yes, he thought it was a splendid idea and went about sucking throat pastilles for a week so as to be in good voice. The setup was the same as the play in Hamlet, with what to catch, the conscience of the king, and all that. Yes, I see the strategy, all right. How did it all work out? It didn't. Harold lives in the cottage of Mrs. Bootle, the postman's wife, where they have only oil lamps, and the sermon was on a table with a lamp on it, and he bumped to the table and upset the lamp, and it burned the sermon, and he hadn't time to write it out again. He had to take out something, another topic from the old stockpile. He was terribly disappointed. I pursed my lips and was on the point of saying that all of the web-footed muddlers in existence, H.P. Pinker took the well-known biscuit, when it occurred to me that it might possibly hurt her feelings, and I desisted. The last thing I wanted was to wound the child, particularly when I remembered that crack of hers about recalling Bartholomew. So we've got to handle the thing another way, and that's where you come in. I smiled a tolerant smile. I can see where you are heading, I said. You want me to go to your uncle Watkin and slip a jack under his better self? Play the game Basse, you want me to say? This ends episode number 254 on the 31st of August 2020, the final episode of August 2020.
For more awesome content, tune in to the next episode of The Weekly Show with Aditya.